I can only imagine what that noise is. In the back of my mind, you're like throwing tennis balls against the wall.
I do have a dog in the room, so.
That's so funny. I was gonna ask you to be like, we can hear you. But I liked your answer a lot better. Yeah. You're like in one of those like insulated indoor courts. And it's
Yeah.
like, that's exactly what it sounds like.
Working on her serve.
I love a multitasker.
Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you and to everyone else that's here.
My camera's off because I'm still kind of eating lunch and nobody needs to watch that. And it's recording. Ooh, gross. So
I mean, if you want to show us you eating, I'll show you my, my nasty serve. It'll be great.
yeah, it's not a 1-for-1. It's not a it's not a quid pro quo. It really isn't.
Will you at least tell us what you're eating?
Yeah.
A salad.
Oh, that's boring.
Wow. Thanks for being judgmental.
It depends what's on the salad.
Uh,
Yeah, because there are good salads.
I was hoping for something a little fancier. I need to eat more salads myself, so.
I feel judged, I don't feel like this is a safe space anymore. And I am putting my microphone on.
You have a right to enjoy your salad, Ricky. By the way, everyone, I have good news. We won't have any interruptions this week.
Yay!
Our Zoom account has finally been fixed, so we'll be able to finish a meeting fully.
I do apologize for creating an unsafe space for salad eaters. That was not my intention.
That's funny. I had a salad for lunch too, so I'm a salad eater.
I'm eating one for dinner, so.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just
Jonathan, if it makes you feel better, I'm eating an oatmeal cookie.
That sounds great.
It's supposed to say sign, not saying I apologize.
Oh, I love this.
Too late. I'm gonna sing in today.
Hey, Ricky, let's do a duet here, Ricky. You ready?
All right. Did you see Alicia's lunch there? She just put in her lunch in the chat. That's quite a lunch.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
That passes your standards, Jonathan, for lunch. Welcome, everybody. We're just letting folks have a minute to enter the space while you're here waiting. Go ahead and sign in. Get that step out of the way.
And we have quorum, Madam Chair.
Great. Thanks so much, Melissa. Welcome, everybody. Happy New Year. I believe we will get dropped into the chat again, the sign-in sheet for today, to fill out that form. We are calling the January 17th, 2024 HSAC meeting to order. It is 3:03. We typically read the goals at the beginning of the meeting, so I'll do that. First is finish the job of ending chronic homelessness, prevent and end veterans homelessness, prevent and end homelessness for families, youth, and children, and set a path to ending all types of homelessness. As a reminder, we do now have again in the chat the sign-in sheet. Please do that. Also, please stay muted unless you're coming off mute to speak. If you've got a question, raise your virtual hand or drop your question in the chat, and we have folks monitoring that. And those are our housekeeping and reminders. Next on our agenda is our public comment period. So I didn't hear of anybody ahead of time that signed up. Is there anyone here today that has a public comment? All right, hearing nothing, we'll move on to the approval of minutes. Members should have received the December minutes via email from the Durham Opening Doors email yesterday morning. Anyone have edits or corrections? Give folks 1 minute to look over those. All right, hearing no edits or corrections, I'll open the floor for a motion to approve the minutes for our December 2023 HSAC meeting.
I move to approve. This is Helen.
Second, Ms. Natalie Byer.
Great, thanks Helen and Natalie. And please now vote in the chat. All in favor indicate yes, against no, or abstain as needed. Melissa, do we have enough people voting? So just a reminder, if you're an HSAC member, please vote yes, no, or abstain. We're voting on our minutes.
Yes, we do.
Great, thank you.
Sorry, I was doing some counting.
Yeah, I had some messages in between, so I was having trouble too. Thanks. Great. All right, our December minutes are approved. Thank you so much. Before we move on to the next item on our agenda, I am going to pass off to Colin for an update that he wants to share before we move on. So, Colin.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I think I saw Ebona on as well, so I'm going to refer to her in a moment. Wanted to let you all know that as we are getting into this cold weather snap, we have been working with community safety on expanding our white flag capacity. As you're all aware, we've got the 10 motel rooms that are occupied currently. Families Moving Forward has stood up 3 additional overflow rooms in their community rooms for overnight. 2 families were referred to those rooms last night with the bitter cold. Neither of those 2 families showed up or took advantage of those cold weather options. We are also working with Urban Ministries. They've got 6 spaces for men and 4 spaces for women. public safety is working to stand up a tent option with cots provided by emergency management, and we will be partnering with them. So Ebona, do you want to say more about that? We will be sending out more details with that as the details get finalized. And I know that Ryan and the team over there have been working on final stuff. So if you've got something, please jump in.
Sure. Thank you, Colin. I was going to mention it at the end of the meeting during the announcements, just to share with everyone that the Community Safety Department is partnering with a few other folks on this call to host and bring about a warming station for this weekend. So HART will be putting together, we have received 2 tents from Duke. So we're gonna be holding space for up to 24 people from Friday evening going into Monday morning. We are finalizing the location now, and it will be staffed by HART first responders. And once we get that location finalized, I will be sending out an email with the flyer to different agencies.
Thanks, Ebona. Colin, did you want to add anything else, or I'm not sure if folks have any follow-up questions.
The only other thing I was going to add is Open Table. Minister Drew's on here and he can fill in anything I'm missing, but Drew and I spoke this morning. Open Table was going to use some additional funds and stand up an additional 6 motel rooms for families. We are running into motels not having 6 rooms available. And we're working with the motels, and Drew's trying to find out folks who might be willing to be put on a waiting list should the hotel call back and say, yes, we do actually have rooms available for those families. As of right now, Open Table has not had luck securing additional hotel rooms for families. And with that, the goal is for one of those tents would be used for single women and families who may want to get out of the cold. The tents, just for notification purposes, will be heated. They run on a 3-ton HVAC system off of a 50 amp generator. So there will be heat in those tents, and there is a floor to the tents. So it's not like a, pitching a tent in your backyard. It's those big, huge, heavyweight tents that'll hold some heat and keep the elements off of you. So Drew, I don't know if you have anything you want to add on the motel search at this point.
No, what you shared is correct, Colin, and no new updates to share.
Perfect, thanks.
And Elijah, if I could add an addition to let folks know that the 2 tents for both the warming stations and the beds in the evenings will be no barriers. So if there are unsheltered folks who have pets, they are welcome. If there are folks who, for whatever reason, anyone is welcome to come and sit and be warm during the day. And as long as we have space in the evenings going into the night, everyone is welcome.
Thanks so much, Ebona, for sharing that, and also Colin. I thought I heard someone else speaking. If you have a question, you could raise your hand. Just want to make sure we offer space.
Sharita, yes. I think we are planning to get, cots and blankets are coming from emergency management. They've agreed to loan those. Also, a thank you to City Manager Page for approving this pilot program. And this is a pilot. It's not necessarily going to be stood up every time it gets cold or rainy or whatever else. So just know that this tent is a pilot. We're going to see what happens, and no promises it'll work again. So thank you, City Manager Page, for allowing us to try this. Restrooms, I think they'll either be porta johns or access to restrooms nearby. It depends on what location is finalized. At least that's my understanding.
Yes, that's correct, Colin.
Thank you so much for that update, and thank you so much to the Community Safety Department for standing up this pilot and having folks there. I've been waking up this week thinking I'm really cold and I'm in a house, and so it's really been on my mind, and it's much needed. And I'm really glad that we'll have some extra support this weekend and some very caring folks to take care of our Durham neighbors. So thank you for that update. We'll move on, if I'm not seeing any more questions, to our next item on our agenda, which is the Performance Management Quarterly Report, which our Chair Jonathan Crooms will give us.
Right. Good afternoon, everybody. Jonathan Crooms with Durham County Veterans Services, and I'm also currently the chair of the Performance Management Subcommittee. I don't have a whole lot to report today, but I do have some announcements about things that we are really getting to ramp up and work on. So we are in the midst of doing some trainings for the Housing First evaluation that we'll be doing of our COC funded projects for the upcoming COC application in the fall. So we are working on that. We are also getting ready to start the spring semi-annual evaluation here shortly over the next month or so. So we are hard at work at those things, and I will leave it there and open up the floor for any questions. To which I see there are none. So I turn that back over to you, Eliza.
Great, thank you. All right, our next item on our agenda is the Coordinated Entry Policies and Procedure Update that will be given to us by Jeffrey Rollins. This will need our HSAC approval. If you're speaking, we can't hear you. There we go.
Okay, I was in the share screen doing all that, and everyone can see my screen.
Yes.
And again, thank you, Madam Chair. So we'll just start from the top. The policies had not been revised since 2019. So we knew that it was time for us to do an update to the policy. Again, the first draft hadn't been updated since that time. The reasons why we're making the change are just that part of the required policy review by HUD following the 2022 audit. We also wanted to remove language regarding COVID exceptions and need for clarity regarding referral prioritization process, namely rapid rehousing, and the need to clarify the CE grievance policy. The process itself, reviewers included providers, the lead work group, as well as our COC staff. COC staff reviewed policies from across the country. I did look at, for reference, Alameda County, California, the Wisconsin Balance of State, North Carolina Balance of State, Miami-Dade Trust, Grand Rapids, Michigan, and Northwest Florida. That's realization. our first meeting, we discussed specific areas that required review, that we had a lot of input, some very, very good input from our reviewers. And we implemented as much of that as we possibly could with respect to what HUD required us to have as well. Our second and third review, we went page by page, all 56 pages, and went through and looked at the full policy to see if there's anything else that we may have needed to do that we may not have done. And our final meeting was a review of the revised policy. New policy summary. I'll take this verbatim as well. We modified the guiding principles, removed language regarding COVID exceptions. We defined a clear path and modified the referral process for rapid rehousing. And we updated the CE grievance policy, removing unnecessary appendices. In regards to the modifying the guiding principles, we modified it to include the HUD guidance, and we are now including all of the recommendations that HUD suggests be in our guidance. Removing the COVID language was just that, just a removal of language that we had, the exceptions that were put in place during COVID. And in defining the path, we revised the assessment so that now there's a clear pathway for proper use of rapid rehousing. Rapid rehousing, of course, being light touch intervention with a limited time frame. We also updated our grievance policy. A few weeks ago, my colleague, Anthony Henderson, went over the revision of the grievance policy for the COC and also implemented the code of conduct. So for updating our CE grievance policy, we modeled it after the coordinated entry, the COC grievance policy. And lastly, of course, we removed some unnecessary appendices that were unnecessary for the handbook. Things that we would still be using, but not necessarily needed to be in the handbook. We removed those things. Now, the new policy, our guiding principles. The Coordinated Entry System of Durham, COC, streamlines access to critical resources in the community and accelerates the process of securing permanent housing for individuals experiencing homelessness. I'd like to, again, go through these, each one, kind of reading verbatim so we understand this is exactly what's going to be in the handbook. The following principles guide the coordinated entry system. Entry Point Durham, EPD, adopts a housing first approach that is person-centered, prioritizes the person's needs, and aims to resolve the high housing crisis quickly. EPD strives to ensure that all participants have a quick and low barrier access to the most appropriate services and housing resources available. EPD reduces the stress of the experience of being homeless by limiting assessments and interviews to only the most pertinent information necessary to resolve the participant's immediate housing crisis. And EPD incorporates cultural and linguistic competencies in all engagement, assessment, and referral coordination activities. EPD uses a standard assessment tool and practices to capture only the necessary information to determine the severity of the participant's needs and the best referral strategy. EPD collaborates with mainstream service providers, including the Durham Housing Authority, the Durham VA Medical Center, and Duke Hospital. EPD uses HMIS to manage participant information and facilitate access to available COC resources. EPD strives to ensure that participants do not wait on the prioritization waiting list for periods in excess of 60 days. EPD strives to maintain equitable outcomes for all participants. We are right now at equity. Our system is right now approximately 74% people of color, and our outcomes right now are reflecting just that. We are at equity. Now for a snapshot of the old versus our new policies. I'll leave those on screen just for everyone to be able to get a glance of the things that are on the page, and I'll run through them briefly. Our referral prioritization Our old policy, we prioritized those that had the greatest need, which, as many of you are aware, caused some problems in the system itself, because by prioritizing people with the greatest needs for every outcome, we ended up placing a lot of people, losing a lot of landlords, but also quite possibly not putting people in the best interventions possible, because they were oftentimes going into the first available of what was available at the time, and not necessarily what was going to be best for their long-term stability. Our new policy, we prioritize appropriateness and need. So we're looking at what an appropriate housing intervention is, as well as what the need of the household is. For our CE grievance policy, the policy previously included the ombudsman panel, which has been done away with. So we wanted to have something specific for CE. And at this point, rather than an ombudsman panel, the final say for a CE grievance is the HSAC Executive Committee. There is a process that you go through to file a grievance, but the final say at this point would be the HSAC Executive Committee. In the prior handbook, we had 6 addendums, including entry point intake scheduler, the HART, the SOAR screening, and shelter vacancy management guide. And in the new, because although some of those things are still being used, the majority are still being used, they didn't necessarily need to be in the handbook. So we just, at this point now, just have 2 remaining and removed all of those that were specified in the other column. The last thing that we changed was the appendix and the glossary were separate. So we merged them and placed them in the back, and it is actually the first addendum. So now in the back of the book, the appendix is the glossary, as well as a list of all terms. We presented this to Policy and Planning, and they did approve it, and we're bringing it forward for the same here, looking for any input that will be had here as well. So at this point, that is the presentation, and the floor is open for any questions. Okay. In absence of any questions, if someone is so inclined, this is something.
I see some hands.
Oh, you do? Okay. Thank
Yes,
you.
they just popped up as you were speaking. Ricky.
Hey, thanks, Jeffrey. When will the new policy be available?
After approval, once it's approved, then we will put it out for you.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Sure, no problem.
Sharita, did you get your answer?
It was the same question.
Okay, great. Wasn't sure if you took it down because he thought I saw you. Any other questions?
If I could add as well, Madam Chair,
Yes.
the one that will be that you'll be receiving is the one we did our last revision. That is the same one. So pending approval, it will be that last revision that will be released.
Yes, Rita.
I actually do have another question.
Sure.
I wrote down, my note says quick resolution, low barrier access, and the new policy change for referral prioritization, prioritizing appropriateness and need. So how will we manage? What's the plan for us to manage folks who call in initially for shelter, but also could be served under rapid rehousing, street outreach? I imagine we will get an influx of new referrals to those places. So how will we as a system handle that?
That's a very good question. The goal is when someone is initially coming in through EPD or one of the other access points, they'll be assessed. But what's happening under the old policy was that a lot of times people, if they were a lower level priority, they were not being prioritized at all. So what we're doing now is we're having our by name list prioritization meeting on Thursday, but we're also going to be having a case conferencing session as well, So it won't just be a static referral. We'll be in discussion as to what's going to be the most appropriate referral. So they'll be working with the case manager, possibly at Street Outreach or at EPD. If they're receiving supportive services, say from your agency or maybe from Project Access or another supportive services provider, the case conferencing will be where we'll be having that discussion. What's going to be the most appropriate for this household? If it's a new household, then we'll be looking at it with fresh eyes. But if it's a household we've already served, then we've already tried some things. We want everyone who's been involved to be at the table. If they were previously placed with, let's say, Families Moving Forward, and now they're at Housing for New Hope or being assessed for that, then we will be having that discussion. These are the things that happened the last time. How can we avoid those pitfalls, or do we want to try something very similar? Again, this time, maybe some things in the household have changed. So case conferencing will be where those things occur. I see. Did that answer your question?
She dropped one more thing in the chat about capacity. What about capacity specifically?
I can elaborate on that if you want me to.
Yes,
Okay, because I was actually in the process of typing even the third question. I'm sorry, y'all know I have questions. So in the past, some of our sometimes street outreach, or rapid rehousing have had like more referrals than they can manage. So I imagine with us switching the model to appropriateness and need-based, they will then get an influx, like more referrals than they've ever gotten. Specifically, how would we respond to that if we get to a point where we get to that kind of overload of those other services because we don't have enough shelter space? Like, how are we going to manage that? And then the second piece to that is that oftentimes many of the folks that you guys are talking about in the by name list meetings are people that are already like very well known to me, are already connected to me and working with me. But because of the way the time and stuff that those meetings happen, I'm not able to participate. So if the expectation is for me to be the system service provider helping that person at some level, how will I know?
Two very good questions. Let's take the first one first. Capacity, how will we handle it? To be quite frank, we're not handling it now. There's a much greater need, and there are a lot of other variables that are in play. That being the lack of landlords, the cost of rent, having recidivism, or people that are, as we refer to them as frequent flyers, people who we're seeing quite frequently and have tried multiple interventions on. So what we're trying to do with the implementation of this new policy and with the case conferencing is we're trying to work through that and get people prioritized into a more appropriate venue. We've had persons looking through the records who were prioritized for rapid rehousing who very clearly should not have been in rapid rehousing. Very clearly we're going to need additional supports, and that was not the case. So with the new assessment, what we're trying to do is we're using rapid rehousing primarily as a short-term intervention. We're looking at less than 24 months. We expect the household to be able to, at that point, to move forward and without any further assistance from us. What will happen during the interim is while they're in the program, you'll be looking at helping to either increase their income if that's possible, get them into an EHV or a housing choice voucher, or getting them into a more stable situation, not necessarily in the unit that they're in, but working through the time that we have them to get them somewhere secure. There are, of course, going to be people with higher barriers who need PSH or who need something more permanent. And what we want to do is clearly define and clearly separate as much as possible those two. And that's what we didn't have before, was a clear separation of the two. And there are going to still be people that you may see that may also be in street outreach that we are very, very familiar with. Case conferencing will be at the table, where street outreach is at the table. The city, myself, is at the table. you at the table, anyone else who's had contact. It'll be very, very, very person-centered and specific to that household. And we'll be doing those frequently, very frequently. And if you have someone in particular, it's just an example of things to come. If someone that you're seeing and you want to have that person discussed, then you would just simply make us aware. And in case conferencing, there'll be set aside time where everyone who's involved with that household will be in that meeting. Hopefully some in person, but we'll start out as we are on Zoom now. Does that answer both questions?
Great. Thank you. And I'm also seeing Ricky's hand raised.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Hello, Jeffrey.
Hi.
So, is the by name list meeting and the case conferencing meeting the same thing, or are they two
No.
completely, so they're like 2 separate days, 2 separate times?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The prioritization meeting will continue to be what it is. It'll just be, we're looking at prioritization. That meeting, once the assessment is in place, should shorten because we want to stick very rigidly to what what the assessment says. If the assessment says that this household is next, this household has the highest score and it's appropriate for that particular unit. Say if it's a single person and there's a place open at Williams Square, Andover Williams Square, then that person would be the next person in line to go there unless there's an exception brought forward by the housing provider. Say if that person is banned from that provider or from that particular unit or that place, then we would move to the next one. But if they're next in line, they're next in line. So prioritization would get much, much simpler. But because it will be much simpler, there has to be another outlet for discussion. So the second outlet would be where there will be discussion, where we'll be talking about that client, and everyone who's involved or has been involved would be on that separate call. It'd be a much more intense call, and we wouldn't be going through a list of 180 people. We would be discussing maybe 8 if we're lucky in a particular meeting. And what we're looking at is in case conferencing, we're first looking at the people who've been hardest to prioritize and hardest to place, because if we can get those people moving, as we know, just like with homelessness itself, it's about 10% of the people using 90% of the resources. So if we can find a way to work through those that 10, it'll free us to get to the 90.
Thank you.
You know.
Thanks so much for those questions. So with this presentation, we've seen some potential updates and we are being asked to vote on these coordinated entry policies and procedures. And so if there are no further questions, I'd be looking for a motion to move us forward.
I move that we accept the corrections to our policy as presented today.
Thank you, Sharita. Do I have a second?
I'll second. This is Helen.
Thanks, Helen. Please vote in the chat if you are an HSAC member, yes, no, or abstain. And as we've got votes coming in, Julia, I see your hand. Please go ahead.
So, yeah, I think it's great. And I'm not an HSAC member, so I wouldn't be a voting person. I'm just clarifying that we haven't seen the full policy yet that we're voting on. Is that right?
So we have seen the changes that we are voting on to update the policy.
I see. So we're seeing these reflected in this table. Is that right?
I'm gonna let Jeffrey answer that.
Yes. Yes. There other than those things that are listed here specifically, there are no other changes.
Right. Yeah. Not very detailed though. I mean, it's very good and I love the table. I'm just saying that it's not a lot of detail here. But thank you. And I'm looking forward to participating. Thank you.
I will say this, that part of the group who did the reviewing, when Policy and Planning looked at it, actually the members who were in the review process and who went through this were also members of policy and planning. So for them, it was pretty much a review, and they went through again page by page, and only did we only indicated these changes here are things that needed to be changed. There was some moving around of things like as I indicated with the glossary, but for other things are pretty much we have to have certain things because of HUD guidance. So there was a lot of that. There's nothing we could do other than to include that information. And again, this is all that we changed. And because of the length of the document, I did not include it here. It is a very lengthy document, close to 60 pages.
Yeah, I really appreciate all the work that was done, and thank you so much. I'll look forward to looking at it later. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Juliet. And Jeffrey, is that full 60-page document available somewhere online? Is that part
It
of
will,
the-
yeah, I was gonna, as soon as I didn't want to release until I got approval. But once I have approval, absolutely.
That'd be great. Wonderful. And it looks like from our votes that it has been approved. And I will just second the appreciation from folks in the chat and online to the work group that went through that page by page and really thoughtfully pushed us forward. Sharita, am I seeing your hand again?
Yes, I was just curious, Jeffrey, if we can get like an email blast when you post the that new approved policy.
I
In
think
case folks want to look at it, do we get those? Do we?
I'll be working on that. So once Jeff once it gets approved, Jeff is gonna send me the document, and I'll have to get it posted to the website and everything. So when that process is happening, I'll be sure to send out to the full HSAC, just like we did with the grievance policy. So it'll follow the same process.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Y'all are the best team. All right. We are moving forward to our February HSAC retreat and just some information updates from Melissa on that.
Thank you, Eliza. Hello, everyone. This is really just going to be a reminder that our next HSAC meeting is going to be a full day retreat for HSAC. So if you weren't already aware, I did send a full calendar invite to block your full day on February the 28th. So we'll get started and have like a welcome. And I know some of us actually haven't met each other in person. Like, I don't think I've met Eliza or Sharita or like anyone that I've spent so much time talking to in person yet. So we will have like a little bit of time at the very beginning of the day at 10 a.m. to kind of get to know each other and get some intros out of the way. And then after that, we have several activities lined up. Some of them will involve discussion. We've even talked about doing some kind of case study with everyone so that we can kind of get like a deep dive into what it's like to work within our homeless system, because I know there are several of our HSAC members who don't necessarily work directly with homeless services. So we do want to give you an opportunity to get a little bit more into what that process is like. So once we get through the morning initial like informational part, we are trying to plan for some kind of tour for the day. We don't have a location 100% finalized. We have 3 possible locations. So I don't want to tell you this is where we're touring, because where we tour depends on which location we get. But just, I do want to give you guys that kind of like caveat that just know we are going to be doing some kind of tour during the HSAC retreat. So wear comfortable shoes so that you don't have any issues walking around. But we won't be going too far, I promise. We also have plans to have some kind of like lunch, so you guys don't have to worry about lunch for the day, because we're going to steal your day from you. And then there are some other activities that are planned and presentations. But I wanted to use this time to get a little bit of feedback from everyone. If there are specific things that you wanted to know about the HSAC, the work that the HSAC does, or something that you'd like to be included in the retreat, I can't promise that we're going to make those things happen, because we have a limited amount of time for the retreat. But I did want to give one last opportunity to our HSAC to be able to submit, hey, can we somehow include this in our retreat or in some kind of session within the retreat? So if you guys don't mind writing in the chat, if you have any ideas, and then Eliza, if you feel comfortable shouting out one or two ideas that pop in, feel free to do that. But I would really appreciate if you guys have any additional feedback, because Eliza and I and the exec committee will be approving an agenda within the next couple of weeks and sending it out to everyone. And I just don't want to leave out anyone's ideas before that retreat happens. I did get a question. Okay, so the date of the retreat is February the 28th. So that's the same date as our next HSAC meeting. We'll start at 10 a.m. That's when everyone we're asking everyone to arrive by 10 a.m. You can always arrive a little bit early. I'll be there by 9. And then we'll finish up with our HSAC meeting. So our HSAC meeting starts at 3. We'll have the HSAC meeting in person, but we'll still have a Zoom meeting link available for people from the public who'd like to join the meeting. And once we finish our HSAC meeting at 4:30, that will conclude our retreat. Abena?
I would love to be able to share information at the retreat regarding the surveys and listening sessions that we've done with some of our unsheltered neighbors, as well as giving an update on how things go this coming up weekend with the Women's Center / shelter.
That's a great idea. Thanks for sharing that. Sounded like Melissa's typing, so we got it down.
I thought I muted him. I'm doing so bad. Okay. I'm gonna thank you. I made a note, so I'll make sure to talk that over with Eliza later this week, and we'll talk about the agenda.
Thank you.
And Beverly, yes, I will send a reminder. Right now on the calendar invitation, I think it just has the time block, but we don't have a location up there yet. I should have a location finalized by next week. I have one for sure that we can have, but I'm trying to get a better location. So I'm hoping I'll have an answer to that one by this Friday. So once I have that location finalized, I will update the calendar invitation with the address, and I'll also, if there are specific directions about parking or anything like that, I'll make sure that it's included in the details. So I will make sure that everyone is fully informed. I don't want anyone like popping up to community development or anything like that because I didn't share. So I'll be sure to send out all the information. Russ?
A number of us have been asking and kind of poking around to try and understand about the set-asides related to the populations we serve that are in the new Affordable Housing Bond Fund projects. And so I think and I'm happy to explain this better offline, we really need the affordable housing team at community development to provide us information on what those set-asides are. I know, for example, with one project that has 132 units in it, it has 27 units set aside for folks that are 30% AMI or less, and has target and key units in it, which is another 14. So I think we need not the, I want to see how I say this, not like the marketing information that goes out about all the units being created, but like we need the details of the capacity that's being created, because I think that will help as we have further conversations on things like the shelter and what capacity it's going to need. And as we have conversations about some of these requests to city and county for flexible subsidies. Does that make sense?
Thanks, Russ. Those are things that we're working on trying to pull together and trying to work with the multifamily team. They're extremely short-staffed right now. There's 2 people. There should be 4 on that team right now due to a vacancy and person out. So they've been kind of up to their eyeballs dealing with some ARPA funds and some other things that are happening, but we are working on pulling together that data.
Okay. And I will offer, I mean, we have a new Coverdale fellow coming on from Sanford here in the next week that's looking for projects, and all of this should be a matter of public record. So I am more than happy if somebody will point us to the applications for somebody to go and do that work, because I appreciate the honesty about the capacity issues, and we're happy to come in behind and do some of that, because I know it's in the data somewhere, and we're happy to help however is best for the team.
You got it. Thank you, sir. Appreciate the offer.
Yep.
I didn't see any other potential things come through in the chat, but if anyone else feels comfortable sharing, you can unmute or send an item in the chat that you'd like to consider for the agenda for the retreat. I'm all ears.
Thanks, Melissa. We'll let people continue thinking, and if something comes up, just feel free to send it in the chat over to Melissa, and we'll add that and have a conversation about it. Thank you for that update on the retreat, and I look forward to seeing many of you in person. I think I joined HSAC in March of 2020 or right before, and went to one meeting, and then we were online. So it'll be my second in-person meeting, and I look forward to seeing folks in person. Next on our agenda is a UMD presentation, and Sheldon will share that with us.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Didn't have my slides starting from the front. Cool. All right, so glad to have the opportunity to share with you all today. I know that there's definitely been conversations, and some of you have already been participating in the process as we've been exploring and working toward bringing what we feel like would be a very helpful resource to our community that would really go a long way toward helping our homeless housing system, really addressing some of the priorities we have, some of the potential gaps in services that we have, but ultimately providing us with the ability to better serve those who are unsheltered in community. We've been calling this the Collaborative Impact Project. And really, you know, a lot of this starts with one of our neighbors, St. Philip's Church, who were one of the founding congregations that actually worked to create urban ministries back in the day. As they participated in some of their campus study conversations, I'm going to say over the past couple of years, really some of the conclusions they came as they thought about how they could best utilize their space and their resources to really be more effective at, you know, I'm going to say their mission as a congregation, to reach out to those who are in need within our community and assist them, really came down to how they could better support UMD and help us to be more effective at serving those populations. And so we were excited about that. Also, as the pandemic came, it really heightened, I think, and brought to the forefront a lot of gaps and needs that we had within our homeless housing system as it relates to services and other resources that could enable us to better do this work. And so many of us began conversations about, you know, what if, what potentially could be. And as we came to that, we felt like not just in terms of thinking of UMD and what was going to be helpful and nice for us as an organization, but what really could be more far-reaching and impactful for the community, to think in terms of services, systems, capacity, and facilities to better equip and move us forward as a community. And that was the idea of a homeless service center. And I'm going to go through some of the whys. I'm going to move pretty quickly because there are a lot of slides. A lot of information are things that many people on this group know already, because we have lots of conversations about those things. But as we think about the growing waiting list, and you know, it's great to see, as I was looking at the email that Nicole sent out the other day, you know, there's been progress made, right? This was a snapshot at the beginning of last month, and now there are only 35 families that are on that list, and there are only 47 singles. But at the point in time, our list had been growing, and it was definitely of great concern, I think, to many of us in community. We also recognize the fact that rents continue to increase, and that's becoming even more challenging for those who are working to place individuals in housing to be able to do that in a quicker fashion, and also to be able to do that in places where they're going to be able to sustain for long term. It was really interesting to look at the fact that, so many people in community are cost burdened, paying more than 30% for their housing. And, even more, higher percentage as we look at renters who are in that. So there's a crisis with the growing list, but then also we know that there's so many more people who are right on the edge, and any given thing could place them into having to put their name on our waiting list for shelter. And still, this has been borne out as we look at the increase in evictions that we see across our community going forward. So again, there are just some slides to emphasize the fact that someone would need to be earning a wage of over $25 an hour, really, to be able to afford what's considered the fair market rent. And just for example, those who are working, who are staying at UMD right now, really their average wage is a little less than $11 an hour. So, they'd have to have a couple of part-time jobs or a couple of jobs really to be able to afford what's fair market rent at this point. And I think that would be the case for a lot of other folks in community. Again, talked about the evictions. You can see we were number 20 in the state as it relates to evictions that are still happening within the county. As we think about this and look at it, we know that this is a priority. We feel like this is something that's the right thing to do as we think about how we can just more effectively bring about resources to help us meet the needs of this population. Again, as we move through this, we want to be able to address some of our system priorities while also addressing service gaps that we see. Just for example, we talk about day services for those who are unsheltered, increased capacity. We've just had some conversations about capacity for singles and families. Expanded medical respite opportunities, and then also expanded healthcare for those who are unsheltered within our community. And ultimately, we know that we have needs now, but we know that those needs most likely as we grow as a community would increase. So how do we prepare to meet those needs going forward? Just gonna go past the affordable housing slide. So as we think about our homeless services continuum, we know that there's definitely a lot of pressure because currently there's not capacity on the shelter side to take in all the individuals who are in need. And then we know because of the pricing and other things that happen with affordability, it's hard to move people through and get them out on the other end. So, we don't see this as a be-all, end-all solution, but it helps to address some significant pieces of our continuum. And then hopefully as we have other investments in the system, whether it be additional permanent supportive housing, additional other affordable housing that come about in our system, then that will create a better flow overall to allow us to be able to bring people into the system, but also moving people through into housing options that we would hope that would be permanent. And this was something that when we came across it was really impactful. I think looking at some of the research that was out there from other areas of the country, and there's a cost whether you do anything or you do nothing. to having unsheltered folks in your community because they're using resources, whether they're social service resources, whether they're the hospitals and other medical resources, whether there's involvement with the criminal justice system and other things. And they, have a range where they're kind of estimating these costs to be between $35,000 and $44,000 per person. So, that was very eye-opening as we think about, hey, if we've got 300 or 400 people, at least those that we typically end up counting just on the point in time, who we know are unsheltered and homeless in our community, and you put a multiplier to that, there's a lot of resources and a lot of money that's already being spent really to care for the needs and the impact that they're having on the community. So as we think about meeting the needs, so we definitely know that takes partners. No one entity or individual can do that alone. And we've been exploring this process with some partners, Families Moving Forward, Housing for New Hope, Project Access, Lincoln Community Health Center, as well as representatives from St. Philip's Episcopal Church and others. But these are the core partners who really would end up at this point been identified as having significant services or service components to be a part of what we're calling the Homeless Service Center at this point in time. So one of the things that we've done is really we wanted to work to see what's happened in other communities across the country. And so begin to have some outreach to see what's been done in other places, and also what's been done that somewhat closely resembles what we think would be a good solution for this community at this point in time. So we came across and had conversations with Second Avenue Commons. They have a mix of emergency shelter along with a health clinic, a cafe, other we'll say day services that are provided there. This was an initiative that was really driven by their local health system and a local financial institution. You have another project here that was in Fairfax. Again, it's somewhat smaller than what we are proposing, but it also, has a mix of different services from shelter, and actually has some supportive housing units that are attached to this project. But again, this was a county funded project, whereas the other project was mainly funded by private corporations from the health field and the financial field. Some other projects that were somewhat larger, as we looked at a project in Denver. Again, it's got a pretty similar mix as they think about health center, shelter, cafe. It also has housing that's a part of this, which is somewhat different than ours. But again, there were a number of these different projects that we look at, some smaller, some larger. You can see this is a pretty large scale project that was done in Minnesota. They did this in 2 phases, but it definitely has housing. That's a large component of it, as well as a number of other additional resources to serve the population that resides there. But ultimately, just looking at these precedent projects, it was pretty clear that something of this scale needed to be something that ends up being a public-private partnership, really, to be able to pull it off. And you can see that these projects kind of range from a strictly public all the way to having a mix of public-private in them. And so, that was our goal and our thought as we look at this. How are we able to reach out and bring in our local government partners from the city and from the county to be able to work with us to help bring this type of resource to community. So this slide here, it really just gives some focus to the fact that things are changing around us, right? You've got the shelter here, the cafe, St. Philip's, and then everything else around us is coming out of the ground or has already come out of the ground, and you have new developments. So, you know, what can happen, what needs to happen to make sure that this property where we are, we can be able to appropriately leverage it to provide capacity to serve the population that we're working with. So as we look at our property breakdown, you see the shelter is currently on the purple lot here, and the shelter is owned by the county. We have our resource building where the cafe is, the food pantry, and the clothing closet. This is a corner that is actually owned by St. Philip's. So the thought in the proposal is that St. Philip's is open to giving up their parking lot in their corner of Dillard and Main, really for the construction of this new service center. And so that does a couple things for us. One, it creates other opportunity sites, because once our operations would be moved off of this property, potentially, and it's a site that could be developed for additional affordable housing or some other resources to serve the service sector, to provide services. Also, there's potential as we think about families moving forward and their existing sites to be able to be utilized for additional services. And, you know, that does a couple things. One, we know that property is expensive. So it begins to bring into play properties and eliminate some of the costs for actually acquiring land. And then land itself that is going to be in this area that's suitable for other resources to be brought is also rare. The other thing it does is provide the opportunity for us to be able to have continuous operations while such a facility would be constructed. So there would be no break or no need to move people somewhere as something is developed or renovated. So again, that was a plus. And ultimately, we are looking to the county who would continue to have ownership of such a facility, much as we currently have with the current shelter and the providers in there. We would just have arrangements with them for ongoing services to be provided in the facility. So again, this is just a massing. It's definitely not architecture, and I know the architects that we've been working with want to make sure I stress that. But it just goes to illustrate that something of the size that's thought to be needed could fit on that existing property, withstanding what the actual design would be at this point. So it's more about square footage and size. Again, just talking about the opportunity site for our current location. As we would move this forward, just offering up a unique opportunity for additional housing, additional services for this population to be able to be provided. This is just an example, just showing, hey, you could have some type of housing development similar to what's going up next door that could be there, that could be more dedicated for, or we'll say affordable for those that we serve and are working to house within community. All right, so as we think about this facility, so what are we saying that we hope to be able to provide out of you? As we think about some of the priority needs, we know that we would want to be able to provide additional emergency shelter, non-congregate and congregate shelter options that disregard that 300. That's a number that's there, but we know that whatever the number would be would have to be right sized based on what the need, defined need would be for our community going forward. Also, we talked about having some access for medical respite units that would be able to be a part of this, working with our partners at Project Access to assist with that. Additionally, and I think this is a big component because it's something that's been discussed, I know before I came to the community and definitely since I've been here, are being able to have day services offered, and really somewhere to provide for showers, for laundry, phone charging, possibly even mail center there for those who remain unsheltered in community, just allowing them to be able to access some of the basic resources that are needed day in and day out. Additionally, it would offer and afford for the opportunity for the healthcare clinic for the homeless to be able to expand, and also potentially offer additional services through their center. The community cafe, the food pantry as well, those things would continue to operate within this facility as well for those who are, low wealth households within our community. And then lastly, we think about collaborative workspaces, collaborative office space. So at the moment, really, we've identified that, UMD and Families Moving Forward would be relocating our programming there. Housing for New Hope has targeted for street outreach to have location here. You've got the healthcare clinic for the homeless being here. And, we've also had some conversations with Ryan and the Heart team, looking at potentially having some components of Heart being able to be co-located with us, and then other service partners within community that might be there to avail themselves for those who are coming for day services or those residents in facility. At this point, we're looking at this being about an 85,000 square foot facility. And you're talking about $60 million construction type cost, ultimately with pre-development around the $72 million to make something like this become a reality. Again, as we think about the impact, we know that there's new services, expanded system capacity. We also know that we want to be very intentional as we think about this being something that's delivered and really has design, and think about being trauma informed for facilities, which we know that, our current facilities are not always fit that bill. We also believe that this helps engage more of an unsheltered community as we think about the day services alone, but also the impact from potentially having non-congregate spaces. We would be more in line and able to assist those that currently they really don't want to come into shelter because they're not able to function in the congregate environment. And therefore, we are not as effective at being able to serve them. That was one of the things that we saw during the pandemic when we were having the hotel rooms. There were some people that came because they were willing and able to function and stay in those rooms. And so they were able to be engaged in services with us and other providers. And we were actually able to help them get housed. Whereas before, they would not engage because just they were not able, they knew they were not able to function in a congregate environment. Ultimately, we see this being able to reduce costs from our community for those who are unsheltered. We also are looking at the coordination and improvement there amongst the different providers and effectiveness that we can see as we serve this population. And additionally, there's additional benefit as we think about this continuum of being able to open up additional opportunity sites that additional resources can be built on, namely or mainly, thinking about affordable housing for our population as we move forward. So we know that this is a, 4 or 5 year process if things are going right and not having the barriers that, take up a lot of time. At this point, we're really just at the strategic planning point. We've had a group that's been meeting for not quite a year with representatives from the different partner groups, as well as some representatives from AJ Fletcher Foundation, from Downtown Durham, Inc., and some other partners, thinking through this process, having conversations with local groups such as Durham Can and others for feedback. But now we're at a point where a lot of the planning and conversations that could be held without really having funds and commitment to move this project forward is kind of where we are. It was great that I had the opportunity to present to the joint session with the County Commission and City Council a few weeks ago, really then to be able to ask for support to help move this project forward. It felt like that was received well. And we're in the process now where we would be waiting to be able to get additional funding really to do more of the pre-development work. Namely, there's things that need to be done from a standpoint of feasibility study as we think about pulling the funding together for this, because it would be the fact that it would be a public-private partnership. But then also there's things that need to be done in terms of thinking about the type of entity that actually functions to operate the facility, how the partners work together, how other partners are brought into the mix to be able to provide services from the facility. And then also you still have all of the design work and conversations that have to happen really to create what the facility would look like and how it would best function. So there's lots of things left to do in this process and lots of questions still to be answered. But we definitely have a good start at this point. And so, this was the questions that were put forth to County Council and County Commission, City Council and County Commissioners, really to get some commitment from them. And then also having support from staff to help us continue to work through these additional pre-development and development items to move the project forward. So that's where we are at this point. Still, I think a lot of us are still very excited about the possibilities that this has, but we know that there will be a lot of work still to come and definitely lots more questions to be answered and blanks to be filled in. But we definitely see the promise and the potential of this being an impactful project, not only for our community, but most definitely for those who are unsheltered and how we can help them have better life outcomes. So I'm going to stop there.
Thanks so much, Sheldon, for this presentation. I know our exec team was excited to have you share today, and we want to make sure that folks are informed. So today there's not really an ask for HSAC. We just want to make sure that folks are aware of what's happening. And as this continues moving, there may be opportunities for us to, as a body, show support, and we'll certainly continue to stay in touch. Sheldon, is there, like, if folks are, we're running tight on time today, we have another item, so I'm just curious if folks are interested in learning more. Is there something on a website? I saw earlier a question about this PowerPoint. I know that it was loaded into the county website during that presentation, but it can be a little wonky to find. So if you could offer any of that information for folks, that would be helpful.
Yeah, this is something that we can share at this point. I know that as we move forward, there's going to be other engagement opportunities with definitely other providers and other partners to be able to learn more, but also to be able to be engaged in the process as it starts to move forward in a we'll say a quicker fashion. But at this point, definitely could share this PowerPoint.
Great. That'd be wonderful. And I think the imagination of what's possible is really exciting, particularly as, we've just talked about the need and the pilot warming shelter this coming weekend. So thank you so much for the years of work that came before this to get to where you are. And we look forward to hearing more updates.
Right. And that's something that's exciting too, because as we talk about this, we're like, man, so it would be great. Like if we already had this, there would be a place that we could convert and, bring people in without having to go through a lot of different hoops to stand up something on the fly to be able to have capacity. So I think it's going to be great.
Thank you for sending that PowerPoint. And thank you for sharing that information with us. We're running a little behind schedule, but our next item is very important and timely for an approval of requests for additional funding from the city and county. This is a recommendation that's coming from, I'm sorry, I'm losing track, the Policy and Planning Committee, but also the exec team has looked at this, and we wanted to bring it to you all today to get this request in as the budget season is starting. So I'll pass it off to you, Colin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will share my screen to walk everyone through this as quickly as I possibly can. Go from here. Can everybody see this? Perfect. All right. So we, the HSAC submitted a request late in 2023, too late in the budget cycle. And that was after I had presented a deep dive to the city council in January of 2023 on homelessness, asking, there was a request by one or several of the council members for a wish list of items from the HSAC. So we submitted a request in March of 2023 that Captain Helen Tripp signed off on when she was chair of the HSAC. And the request was for $2.75 million of additional supportive services staff, $2 million for flexible housing vouchers, $25 to $30 million of permanent supportive housing units to be constructed, and sort of to piggyback on Sheldon, $60 million for a new shelter. That was the request last year. And after Eliza and I presented to the joint city county commissioners and council last month, there was a request for, another budget request coming from HSAC. So executive committee started with the previous request and didn't feel comfortable making the recommendation themselves and kicked it over to policy and planning for further evaluation and more voices to be heard to come up with a request. And the policy and planning committee met early January and came up with an option. So the request mirrors similar to what we had previously, and the request would be for $2.75 million for additional supportive services. And these staff members could help approximately 450 households per year, depending on what type of services, the intensity level of services, and the number of people in households that require that. So obviously a family will require more time sometimes than a single adult, especially if there's multiple members of the family with multiple needs. The staff could be anything from case managers to a SOAR worker. For those who aren't familiar with SOAR workers, they're specialty workers who assist with helping people apply for disability, tracking down paperwork, working with doctors to document this. Also being able to look at using these funds to help cover cost of supportive services that may be able to help meet medical needs for those who are experiencing homelessness. We do know that Medicaid is expanding, but we also know that not every person experiencing homelessness is going to qualify for Medicaid or even the expanded Medicaid due to a variety of reasons, which could include immigration status or being a couple pennies an hour too much on the annual income to be able to qualify for Medicaid, but may need assistance. So this is really trying to come up with, here's money to be used to meet as flexibly as possible the variety of needs that we have in the homeless system, and for those experiencing homelessness, knowing that there's a wide variety of needs and specialized services that folks need to be successful to exit homelessness. We also know that these supportive services are critical if we want to be able to take advantage of all these new affordable housing units that are coming on board, because people need not just a voucher, but a lot of times the property managers are seeking supportive services to be available if and when needed to help intervene when things go awry. The second request, the second part of the request is an annual investment of $2 million for flexible housing vouchers. These vouchers could be used to extend federally funded rapid rehousing. As you know, federal rapid rehousing through ESG or COC ends after 24 months. Not everybody is able to afford fair market rent and the full rent after 24 months. We could have a pool of funds that could extend that using local dollars, giving people a few extra months or years if needed. Not, some of this money could also be used to set up permanent supportive housing programs for people who don't meet the HUD criteria of permanent supportive housing or other needs. The goal would not be to have them just turn into a standard HCV without supportive services. These would be really kind of targeted for people in the homeless system, exiting homelessness, and really being kind of intentional about where they go. The rough estimate is it could, $2 million a year would probably help about 100 households. And that's on an assumption of roughly $1,000 per voucher per household. It gets you up to about 1.2 million, knowing that $1,000 probably is on the low end. We will probably need to go higher than that, just given that rents are much higher, and many of our families, especially if we took the permanent supportive housing route, a lot of that money could be used to pay full rents, which may reduce that 100, or it could increase the number of, it could increase or decrease. A big question, who would get the money? That's a great question. Well, right now there's no money to be given away because the city and county haven't agreed to put money into it, but the hope would be that a request from the HSAC would go to the city and county to work together, and the city and county would work together to split this cost in some way that they agree to. If the city and county agree to fund it, then a competitive process would be laid out similar to our request for proposals. It would lay out the expectations and goals. And then agencies would enter into a contract to carry out the activities at that point. So right now we do not know who or where or exactly what the funds would be for, except for those high level dollar amounts and high level buckets. We would drill it down specifics and who gets it and how would it be administered as we work through the process. It's important to note when I say flexible housing vouchers, these vouchers that would be local money would not have to be administered by the Durham Housing Authorities. These could be run through our nonprofits who are currently doing or new nonprofits who have history of doing rental assistance through any number of rental assistance programs. So the summary would be Policy and Planning Committee recommends the HSAC submit a budget request to the city and county to jointly fund $4.75 million to pay for additional supportive services, $2.75 million, and a flexible housing voucher and flexible housing vouchers in the amount of $2 million. Questions? No questions? Oh, I see Tracy has a hand up. Go ahead, Tracy.
Hey there, sorry I'm not on camera. Just a
problem.
quick question for clarity. Given the amount of money that will be allocated to support the new facilities for the urban ministries shelter, would this be for this fiscal year coming up, 24-25? Given this is kind of like a 4 to 5 year plan, or would it be benchmarked towards it as it goes through the pre-development process?
The current request has nothing to do with the Urban Ministries redevelopment project.
Okay, I thought there was money set aside
No.
to support that. Okay,
Not yet. That's sort of in the early phases. We're nowhere near ready for supportive services at a redeveloped emergency shelter. That's sort of, we're still in the planning phases and waiting, a request, and then funds would have to be found to do that. This request is specifically to meet current needs and work within the system and expand the current system with additional supportive services and additional rents to be able to access units. If you remember, a few months ago, we did a presentation about 30% AMI units, and that many of our persons experiencing homelessness cannot access those because their income is too low, and 30% AMI units don't take 30% of your adjusted income. There's a fixed rate. So most of the folks in our homeless system need to have a subsidy. So these flexible housing vouchers could assist people exiting homelessness with a subsidy when housing choice vouchers are not available. This would be another pool that could help fund that gap to access a lot of these new affordable housing units that are coming online.
okay, but this is for next fiscal year,
This is
correct?
for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2024. Yes.
Okay, all
That's
right,
what
thank you.
Sharita?
Okay, let me see how I articulate this question. So let's say we put forth this request and we're granted this request. In my mind, it would take probably 6 months to do the RFPs and get all of that stuff situated. So that will push us into what, 2025? Or end of 2024?
It'll take a little bit of time, yes.
Yeah, okay. Do we have a number of units that we could definitely say would suddenly become available to the continuum once that process is completed?
We would need to look and see how many units are under construction and how many are about to open. And I mean, that would be the new construction units. Clearly, if you had money to subsidize rents and supportive services, in theory, that would open up a lot more apartments that are within the fair market rent. The challenge if we start renting units above fair market rent is we end up cannibalizing ourselves and making it harder for those with housing choice vouchers to find units. And as landlords will say, well, I'm only going to work with this group because I get more money out of it. So we have to be careful of how we use these funds so that we don't artificially raise rents and make it harder for other groups to access with mainstream housing choice vouchers and HOPWA vouchers and rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing.
So in essence, basically what these funds would do would be able to allow us to take advantage of the units under the affordable housing bond that was passed, whatever year that was, to be able to be prepared to be able to actually house 30% AMI folks in units at that time, because we might not have any mainstream vouchers.
That is correct. I don't know where we'll be with mainstream vouchers. It's taking a really, really long time to get to issue vouchers right now because of short staff at DHA. And we're almost out of our emergency housing vouchers. And to my knowledge, I don't know when DHA will be issuing more housing choice vouchers, as a lot of those vouchers are tied up with redevelopment, moving people around, and project basing, and the fair market rent going up has devalued or has made the subsidy higher for DHA for the vouchers that are currently out there, which means that there might not be many new vouchers coming online because fair market rent jumped. People's incomes didn't jump as much, so each subsidy gets larger, reducing the amount of available money for new vouchers to be issued.
Okay. So and I might sound like a broken record. Folks have heard me like give my opinion before. Sometimes you don't have things you need because you don't ask. Like, I think we need money? Absolutely. But more than anything right now, tangibly right now, we need units. And so my question is, and I wasn't present for the policy and planning meeting because I had stuff going on with my daughter. So I do apologize for my absence on the day that discussion was had. I would really like to see us make an ask for city county support in getting some of getting us piloted access to units that are already up, open, and available in our community, even if it's 10, for us to be able to move some people out of homelessness. And I don't know, we haven't like come right out and made that kind of ask. We just kind of hoped and waited for things like the affordable housing bond things to materialize, and then still trying to figure out how to navigate. And so my question is, how do we get to the goal of what it is that we need? Secondly, my other fear is that at some point, if the economy keeps going the way it does and the housing market keeps going the way it does, even what we're doing now is not going to be enough. And so where does the conversation live for asking our city county officials, and typically people would say this is not a homeless services issue, but it's an affordability issue, is to make some efforts to try to control this number that we're seeing explode all over our community, because eventually we're not going to be able to play this game, and we're going to be sending everybody outside of Durham to somewhere rural where the rents are cheaper. So the just the reality that we're going to be able to continue to play ball at that level is not realistic. And so where does that conversation live? Can we make asks like that, just things that are not necessarily money tied, but consciousness tied, the right thing to do, those kind of asks? That's my question.
So I think, yes, that can be a request. This is a specific budget request for a specific budget dollar amount. I think there is a place to make a request for what can be done. I think the Housing for New Hope housing location is working on it. I think Russ bringing up the question of sort of where are we with all the units that are in the pipeline or have recently become available is another place where that request needs to start with that, because we haven't fully been able to access every single thing that has city or county dollars in it, because we're still trying to pull together all the various lists and all the various projects and trying to figure out who has what money and what money is in them with what restrictions. And then it's figuring out that the developers, when they develop these properties, often then hand it to a property management firm. So we have to know, one, who's the developer? What are the criteria that they agreed to develop the properties? Then once we know that, we have to be able to track it and figure out who the new person in charge is when the property management firm comes in and does all the lease up and all those timing pieces. So there's a lot of moving pieces with each of these. Housing location with Housing for New Hope is doing a great job in the landlord engagement contract of going out and building relationships with existing property managers, existing landlords that have units within fair market rents that could be accessed immediately. And we just had a meeting to work through some of the challenges that we've had being able to access those units, and are taking steps to improve communication and improve getting people into those units, as well as looking for shared housing options and units that folks can afford when they're on a fixed income of $800 or $900 a month. Does that help, Sharita?
Yes, thank you.
Other questions? There's no other questions. We can have a motion to approve the recommendation, I guess. Anybody's so inclined, and then a vote. Or we can wait till next month. Or not do anything.
I would make a motion, but I'm not a member, so.
I think a lot of our members had to jump off at 4:30.
I think the Madam Chair has to call for the motion.
Quorum does remain even after members jump off, so we can move forward with a vote with the members who are present, assuming they are comfortable with voting on this item.
Yeah, so before I call for a motion, I just want to make sure that folks understand the options and the timeline for this. I think exec team was talking and reflecting on our letter that came late, wanting to make sure that our communication around a budget request came more timely. So I'm happy to call for a motion, but also I think, Colin, I think it would be helpful to understand, like, waiting a month would kind of throw us off like it did in the past, correct? Just to make sure. And then I don't know if there's other options like an email vote. And I know that we've done that in the past, but sometimes that feels like a lot of wrangling. So just want to make sure folks know their options.
Yeah, I think we definitely need to, if it's something that the HSAC would like to move forward on, moving it now is the time. Otherwise, as Eliza said, we get further into the budget cycle and we would miss a lot of early on discussions. So it's better to move now if there's an interest in moving now. Otherwise, it might be another year.
Thank you. I have a motion in the chat from Jonathan Crooms that we adopt the funding recommendation as presented. So now we're looking for a second.
I second.
Thank you, Helen, for the second. And then HSAC members, please vote in the chat, yes, no, or abstain.
Based on the number of members who are online and those who have voted, the motion would pass.
Okay.
Colleen had a question about whether or not to do an email vote.
Yeah.
And we had the motion and that kind of came in as voting took place.
I was typing too slowly.
No, you're fine.
It's okay.
I'm not saying it's, I think it's, I don't know.
Procedurally, is there like a recommendation of what to do in that?
I don't know. There was a motion. And a vote began. And then a question to. I'm not a Robert's Rules of Orders expert. Anybody,
I'm looking
Sure.
at the public meeting rules for City of Durham, and once a motion begins, and there's a second, at that point, like whatever the vote result is typically what is final.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that there can't be additional notes included in the minutes of any potential reservations or abstentions, and so on. So we can include those notes in the minutes.
If I could add, I'm trying to vote, but something's happening on my end technically. So my vote is yes, but I don't think it's going through.
Thanks, Tracy.
You guys, Tracy, thanks.
Okay, so let's follow procedures and let's make sure that those abstaining, and we have that noted.
Yep.
Thank you for bearing with us as we went later this time. Before we adjourn, I do want to offer a reminder that point in time count is next week. It's written at the bottom of your agenda, and if folks have any announcements, I want to give people a second, but
I have an announcement.
Okay, Ricky, go ahead.
And this is about the point in time count. So yeah, if you're not excited about it, get excited about it. It is next Wednesday at 7 p.m. taking place at the downtown Durham Library. We are still hoping folks will sign up for an evening of interacting with our unsheltered neighbors. In the chat, I just posted the link to sign up for the count if you're interested in doing so. We've got our new mayor, Leo Williams, coming out. We've got Chair Alam coming out. We've got several news outlets doing coverage over the evening. So hope you're able to make it, not just because you're HSAC members, but because you care about people and care about what Durham is doing to help those who are in this situation. So that's my plug. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ricky. It's helpful to know that y'all still need volunteers. So if you're not able to make it, please share with others that you know might be interested as well. And the link for that is in the chat. Great. Any other announcements? Do all participants need to register?
Yes, you absolutely must register. Part of registration is also signing a waiver that you understand stuff happens, but you're not going to come after the Durham COC or Housing for New Hope or anyone involved with the PIC count. Also want to mention, besides the night of the count, we will be having some targeted events. One is a youth event to try to count a youth who may be housing insecure. That's going to happen on Thursday, January 25th from 1 to 5 p.m. at the skate park across from community development. And we're also encouraging families to congregate at Duke Memorial Church the night of the count so we can get a sense of family homelessness.
Thanks, Ricky. All right, y'all. Julia's sharing, it may be worth reminding everyone that Durham White Flag continues. Yes, Julia.
Yeah, just Durham Rescue Mission. So, just remembering, I know it's really exciting about the tent opportunity. That's great. But it's also just worth remembering that Durham Rescue Mission has White Flag open at Low Barrier and is at the men's campus and also the women's campus on Knox Street. And Orange County also has a White Flag going for folks that are Orange County residents. So it's just, worth remembering that for anyone on the call who doesn't have that info, feel free to send me a quick message and I'll be happy to provide you info.
Thanks, Julia, and thanks for helping me with that acronym. All right, everybody, we've reached the end of this meeting. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thanks, Renee. Do I have a second?
Hey, it's Alicia. Oh, somebody beat me. Second, third.
Natalie, were you speaking up for that second?
I was. It's Natalie Byer. I second that motion.
Okay, thank you so much and appreciate you too, Alicia. Okay, everybody, thank you, and we'll see you next month. We're adjourned.
Have a good one. Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.